Sure, no worries, yeah.
Mahogany, everyone.
Hi, guys. It's been a while since I've been in a university, so thank you for having me. I've done the lecture series at SF State a few years ago, and then also at St. Mary's College, but it is an honor to be here today at Sonoma State University, so thank you for having me. First things first, I apologize for being late. Part of the reason why I was late today was because there was an emergency at City Hall, and Supervisor Jane Kim's office wanted me to come in and speak on behalf of some legislation that was happening. And so instead of me canceling, I was able to find someone to step in for me. So I apologize and thank you again for having me. That being said, I kind of want to jump in because we don't have very much time, except we will also have lunch after this, right? So we're going to do that with some students? Not all of us, just a few, just a select few. Was there a lottery? Was there a lottery system? Is that what happened? Okay. Well, I was told that it's a very mixed crowd today, so I want to start sort of with the basics and then work my way into the activism. One is, who knows what a drag queen is? Just raise your hands. Yes. Oh, you all know what a drag queen is. Who doesn't quite understand what a drag queen is? Don't be shy. I'm hoping there's at least one person. One, two, anyone else? Two people. Okay, so for those two people, does someone want to explain what a drag queen is? No? Y'all knew what it was, but you're not ready to say what it was. Anyone? Any volunteers? Wow, okay. Well, I will warm it up for you. I will get it started. So a drag queen is sometimes called a female impersonator, but I think that's a little bit of a limiting term to use because a drag queen is someone who performs as a woman on stage and is this embodiment of female power and mystique and glamour. And it can be used, you can be a male-bodied person to do it. In fact, the word drag comes from dressed as girl, right? And that's a Shakespearean term. Dressed as girl, because back in Shakespearean days, women weren't allowed to be on stage, and so they would have men play female roles, and in the side notes it would say, so-and-so would come on stage dressed as girl, and so that's where the term drag came from. However, today we have people who are male-bodied who are drag queens, and we also have people who are female-bodied who are also drag queens, and also people who are genderqueer or even trans who perform in drag. Drag has become sort of, it's a platform, a way to express yourself, and also I feel, for me personally, is really an embodiment of that female power and energy that is, you know, so seductive and beautiful and should be celebrated. Does everyone understand that? Yeah, makes sense. Any questions around that? Okay, so now that I've talked about what a drag queen is, let's talk a little bit about pronouns because I think that that can be tricky as well. Does everyone know what I'm talking about when I talk about pronoun usage? So for me personally, I identify as genderqueer. And we'll get a little bit more into that later, but for now, just in terms of pronouns, I will respond to he or she because Honey Mahogany oftentimes is referred to as she when I'm in drag, and for a while I was really like, okay, when I'm in drag I'm gonna be she, and when I'm a guy I'm gonna be he, and I'm gonna go by my given name Alpha. But the two worlds really, especially, and I think through my activism, have really merged together, and so now I really don't differentiate between he or she, and it's just, I think, RuPaul has a really good way of putting it, which is call me he, call me she, call me Regis Kathy Lee. Just do it with respect. So you can refer to me as he or she, and I will accept either or. So again, I'm Honey Mahogany. I'm a drag queen. I'm a social worker, community organizer. I am also a co-op member and an activist. So some of you probably recognize me from RuPaul's Drag Race. Anyone watch that show? Who does not watch RuPaul's Drag Race? Wow, actually quite a few of you. Well, that's okay, that's okay. For those of you who did not watch, I won my season 5. I'm just kidding, I did not win. I was actually the first ever queen double eliminated from the show, which was shade, and we'll get into that later. But if you do watch this, if you haven't watched this show, some things about me. I'm a native San Franciscan. I was born and raised in San Francisco. Yes, native San Franciscans. Anyone else from the SF area? A few of you. So much more beautiful out here though. It's like really calming. Like I felt my stress levels like go down. Yeah? as soon as I left the city. So I was also the first San Francisco drag queen, and actually first drag queen from all of Northern California, and even the Pacific Northwest. Jinx and I were the first ones to be on RuPaul's Drag Race. Before then, all the queens from the West Coast were pretty much out of LA, and so Jinx and I were the two sort of first Pacific Northwest queens. Again, I already mentioned the double elimination. So what I'm here to talk about is drag and activism. So some of you may be wondering what drag and activism have to do with each other. Are drag queens really activists? And the answer is yes. Drag has pretty much always been about activism because drag has been a direct response to the patriarchy, right? Because drag allows men to express themselves in a feminine way. And sometimes, yes, it's used satirically or as comedy, but more oftentimes it is used as a way to show the errors of the patriarchy or the way that the patriarchy is ridiculous and oppressive. Drag has a really strong modern day history as a form of activism. Can any of you name a group of drag queens that is really politically active? Or a drag queen that's really politically active? Not me. Bob the drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race. Yeah, he actually is using his platform. I say he because his name is Bob. But he is actually using his platform to bring awareness to issues. Any other drag queens?
The Sisters of Perpetual.
Yes, that's the answer I was looking for. Thank you. Yes. Okay, come on now. Who knows what the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence is? Who's never heard of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence? Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be able to educate you a little bit on that. So the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are a very, very important group of individuals. Of course, it started in San Francisco because San Francisco is the nexus of all things gay, just so you know. The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence was founded in 1979, and how many of you have ever seen pictures or watched a TV show and seen like a clip of San Francisco, and there's this drag queen there with a white face and a nun's habit on? Anyone? Anyone ever seen that? Sometimes with a beard? No? Okay, well, so the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are actually a group of drag queens who dress as nuns, usually in some sort of white clown face, sometimes even with beards, sometimes with a habit on, sometimes not. And they formed back in 1979, partially as a response to the AIDS crisis and the Reagan administration's response to the AIDS crisis. I'm going to read you their mission statement right here because I think it's phenomenal. The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence is a leading-edge order of queer nuns. Since our first appearance in San Francisco on Easter Sunday, 1979, the sisters have devoted ourselves to community service, ministry, and outreach to those on the edges, and to promoting human rights, respect for diversity, and spiritual enlightenment. We believe all people have a right to express their unique joy and beauty, and we use humor and irreverent wit to expose the forces of bigotry, complacency, and guilt that chain the human spirit. Isn't that powerful? So let's hear it for the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Yes, all that, all those things. So that's them. How many of you have heard of Sister Roma? Anyone? No? I'm going to be sure to tell her that no one here has heard of. She's the most photographed nun in the world after Mother Teresa. So there's another really important drag-related group that I wanted to talk about today. How many of you have heard of the Imperial court system? Anyone? One person, wow. So let me tell you about that. That is also another drag movement that started in San Francisco. And the Imperial court system, which was founded in 1965 by Jose Sarria, who was also known as the Widow Norton, he was a drag queen, is the oldest LGBT fundraising organization in the world, okay? So they basically use pageantry and throw events, and they have people competing for the title of emperor and empress, and they use these functions as ways to raise money for the community. Again, this was way back in 1960, what did I just say? 65. Okay, so that's another group of drag queens who did activism. How many of you have heard of the Stonewall Riots? Okay, almost all of you, that's good. So the Stonewall Riots was an event that actually started in 1969. I believe it took place over a long period of time, but it was basically the response of the LGBT community to constant police harassment, because back in the 60s, back before the modern day gay liberation movement, police oftentimes would go into gay bars and perform raids and harass them just because they were gay, but actually more specifically, they harassed them because they would be dressed in articles of clothing that did not match their sex, right? So back, not even very long ago, there were laws that actually regulated that if you were a man, you had to dress as a man, and if you were caught dressing as a woman or wearing more than, I think it was more than 3 articles of clothing of the opposite gender, you could actually be arrested. I mean, it was against the law. So, when we talk about the Stonewall Riots, the people who really rose up it wasn't just the faggots or the dykes. It was also the drag queens and the trans women, because they were the ones that were being targeted, right? They were the ones who were cross-dressing, and they were the ones who the police were harassing the most. So those are the people that really got the Stonewall Riot moving and started. Now, there's the Stonewall Riot. How many of you have heard of the Compton's Riot? A few of you have. The Compton's Riot was much like the Stonewall Riot. It was expressly started by drag queens, and it took place in 1966 in San Francisco, 3 years before the Stonewall Riot in New York. Why? Because San Francisco is where all gay things start, yes, including the civil rights movement. And there's also the Black Cat Riot in LA, but guess what? That started in 1967, which was still after the Compton's Riot in San Francisco, so my point stands. Why do we think that drag queens and trans people and gender nonconforming people led those riots? Anyone? Sure. Why do we think that it was drag queens, trans people, and gender nonconforming people who led those riots or those political movements? Yeah, exactly. I think it's because, I agree with you, I think it's because they were the most visibly queer, right? They were the first ones that were picked on, they were the most vulnerable, the most easily identifiable, the least able to hide. And so that sort of forced them into a corner where they had to be strong and stand up and fight back. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about today was identity and how we all identify and why. So how do we identify? What are the primary ways in which we sort of ground our identity? Anyone? Anyone want to answer?
I think that identification today, modern times, is mostly through pronouns and action, how you present yourself to others based on what you feel comfortable identification.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. So one of the ways in which we express our identity is through the way that we refer to ourselves and the way that we dress, and that can be that actually incorporates many different forms of identity, right? Because it's not even just gender identity, but also cultural identities. Are there any ways? How do we? Here, let me ask you a direct question. So what is the first way that you identify when someone asks you, or when you think of the term identity, what is the first thing you think of? Say it again? Gender. Anything else? Race, culture, religion, disability or ability, yes. Those are pretty good, yeah. So I have another question, which is, do we think it's about how we are different or how we are the same? Is identity about identifying with a specific group or not identifying with another group? It's both. Yeah, I didn't really have an answer. I was just curious what you guys thought. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how I identify, which I talked a little bit about in the beginning. My self-identity and self-awareness have evolved over time as things do. But currently I identify as Black, I identify as queer, I identify as Ethiopian, I identify as gender nonconforming, and I also identify as gay. So given this identity, how and why did I become an activist? Well, I actually often attribute the beginning of my activism to my youth and upbringing. Let's start with my sort of base identity, the first identity that I really knew, which was when I grew up. I grew up in the Ethiopian culture, which is actually a sort of a vertical collectivism. Have you guys talked about collectivism at all at any point in sociology or anything like that? I know this is not a class specifically, but anyone learned about sort of collectivism versus yes? Do you want to kind of explain what that is? That was so well put, thank you. It explains my tardiness, like I don't care about time, I care about making sure that, Jane Kim has someone to speak for her at the City Hall. Yes, and also, I want to go a little bit more into detail about vertical collectivism. So for me, to me, Ethiopian culture, there's two different kinds, horizontal and vertical. So horizontal collectivism is maybe the one that we usually think of, which is where equality is emphasized, right? And people engage in sharing and cooperation, whereas vertical collectivism, it's all that, but it happens within a hierarchy. So things are not necessarily always equal, but there are some people who will submit to authority, or there are certain people who are given power or put in certain roles, and then the entire group works together for the benefit of the group within that hierarchy. So that was sort of the system that I grew up in. And being, a young person in that system, my understanding of the world is that everyone has to do what they can to help the group and help the community. So that's sort of that was the soil that everything else sort of got, dropped into and grew out of. So from that Ethiopian vertical collectivism, I actually was also raised Catholic and went to Catholic school from K through 12. Any other recovering Catholics in the room? I get like choked up talking about it. It's actually, to be honest, it actually wasn't a completely negative experience for me. I learned a lot about compassion and love and service through the Catholic Church, surprisingly. But more specifically, I was privileged enough to go to a Jesuit high school. Has anyone heard of the Jesuits? One person there. Did you go to a Jesuit high school? No. But you know who they are? Anyone else? Anyone else heard of the Jesuits? So, the Jesuits are a sect, they're actually a brotherhood. They're oftentimes very involved in education. Education is very important to them, but they have 6 defining principles, which I'm going to read to you here. The first is magis, meaning more, and this is the challenge to strive for excellence. The second is women and men for and with others, so sharing gifts, pursuing justice, and having concern for the poor and marginalized. The third is cura personalis, which is care for the individual person, respecting each person as the child of God and all of God's creations. The fourth is unity of heart, mind, and soul, developing the whole person and integrating all aspects of our lives. The fifth, ad majorem Dei gloriam, AMDG, for the greater glory of God. And the sixth, forming and educating agents of change, teaching behaviors that reflect critical thought and responsible action on moral and ethical issues. So these were the things that were ingrained in me for the 4 years that I was in high school, and the things that I really clung to because to me they made sense. Coming from that collectivist culture, I really clung to this idea that we were to be of service to others and that we also needed to respect and celebrate everyone as a whole person. So in high school, I was involved with things like Amnesty International, Service Club, and then of course, the mandatory choir and musical theater because I'm gay. But that's sort of, at that point, I also was heavily in the closet. So, everyone knew I was gay but me. And so when I finally went to college, I went down to Los Angeles and I went to USC. Anyone hate USC here, or anyone love USC? Anyone love USC? No? A few of you, okay, whatever. Are we doing well in football right now? I don't even know. Whatever, so I came out when I was at USC, and it sort of started to change my life, because once I really accepted who I was, I became really, I don't want to say resentful, but maybe angry at the injustice that I saw and the hypocrisy that I saw in a lot of the different groups that I belonged to, including the Catholic Church. So at the time, I was still holding on to my Catholic upbringing, though, and I went to church, was a cantor in the choir, tutored children at a magnet school nearby, but I also was joining the GLBTA. I worked at the campus LGBT center, became the RA for the Rainbow Flora, and became involved in HIV/AIDS research because those were all things that I felt like were really important to do and also helped me really define who I was and figure all of that out. So how does this all relate to drag? So I actually first started experimenting with drag when I was in college. I did it like 2 or 3 times, but you know how it is. It was like, so when I went to college, it was between 2002 and 2006, guys. That was a long time ago, I know. But it was also during the heyday of MySpace. It was before Facebook was readily available. Actually, USC was one of the, I think, first 4 schools to get Facebook because it was first a few select colleges and then sort of opened up to all colleges and then city colleges and then high schools and then everybody else. So we were sort of right at the beginning of that. And so it was just sort of at the beginning of this hyper awareness and sort of posting your lives all over the internet time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know that's all really normal now, but back then it wasn't. Like, people took pictures on disposable cameras, put them in a photo album, and then never saw them again. It was very convenient and safe. But, so I had put like these pictures up on, oh my God, what was it even called? It was some sort of like photo bucket. Yes, girl. How do y'all even know what that is? So I put these photos in Photo Bucket of me in drag because I was looking sexy and cute, and I was like taking pictures with my friend who actually at the time was this very busty female-bodied person who is now actually trans-identified. And we were taking these really sexy pictures together. And so I went to go and I was doing my summer job thing after I graduated, and I came back home and my parents sort of like immediately confronted me with like, these pictures, and they were like, what's going on? And I was like, I'm gay. But I also remember at the time, like my parents were having a really hard time with that. Like I was like, really, Mom? She's like, no, I just thought you were sensitive. I was like, really, Mom? And it was interesting because then my dad seeing me in drag, like pictures of me in drag, and let's be honest, I was super passable. And he was sort of like, what are you, like, are you a woman? Like, do you want to be a woman? What's going on? And I remember being super adamant, like, no, that's trans, and I'm not trans. I'm just gay, and I was doing drag. That was for a performance. So I remember that conversation happening and being really, like, that, making that distinction was really important to me at that time. I feel like I'm getting lost in this story. So moving along, I came out and my parents were like, okay, well, you have too many negative influences here, so we're gonna take you and we're gonna send you to Ethiopia. And so I was like, that's not gonna change anything, but if it will make you feel better, okay, I'll go back home. While I was there, I spent like a month or so like trying to figure things out. But I really realized that if I was going to get out of here, I was going to need to apply to grad school, and I was already thinking about that beforehand. But I was like, this is going to be my mission. It's going to be my excuse to get out of here. Like, Ethiopia was great. It was, wonderful to be with family and like, take a break from, the U.S. I mean, it really was. Like, people live so differently outside of the U.S., and it is so nice sometimes to get away from that. But so I started really thinking about grad schools and what kind of programs I wanted to do. And in doing that research and in doing that work and trying to find an internship, I actually got a job at UNAIDS, which was kind of shocking to me. I didn't expect to be able to just get an internship at the UN, but I did it. And from that experience, I learned that, yes, I definitely wanted to be of service and I wanted to be involved in changing people's lives. And 2, that I never wanted to work in an organization that big ever again in my life because I just felt they were so ineffective. I mean, I just felt like they weren't really working with people in a real way. It just seemed like it was all surface level to me at that time in the position I was. Not saying anything else. So I went and did that, and then I actually got accepted into UC Berkeley's MSW program, and while I was there, I worked at Catholic Charities. Again, I had to loop it back, take it back to the Catholic roots. Went to Catholic Charities, and then Lavender Seniors of the East Bay for my second year internship, and then landed at the Rainbow Community Center, where I became their community mental health director and then their youth programs director over the span of 5 years. So while all that was happening, I was also performing in drag and starting to really express my, I felt like for me, my life has really been about balancing sort of my self-expression and then also my need to sort of serve others and be of service to people. And so I was doing drag, and then I was doing social work, and the two weren't really coming together. And I was also just about to turn 30. I was like 28, 29, and Saturn's return was happening. Anyone in that boat right now? No? Anyone? You guys are much younger than that, aren't you? You guys are like 22, 20, or younger. You only 20? Just you wait, okay? Saturn's return is real. So, I had this so at this time I was trying to do these two things, like always. I mean, nothing's really changed. I was doing too much. But I was at this point where I was like, you know what, like God, universe, whoever's up there, I need to make a change. Please, like, guide me and show me the direction I need to go. So I did, I had that like moment, and I had that prayer, and it felt very real and authentic, and like I was there. And then I kid you not, within 1 month, I got a call from America's Got Talent asking me to audition. I got a call from X Factor asking me to audition. And I also got a call from RuPaul's Drag Race. So I had those three things happening literally within a month. And it sort of seemed as though like drag was gonna be the routes through which I performed, I lived my life or, led. And so I got onto RuPaul's Drag Race, which was an amazing experience that I will talk more about, I think, a little bit later, maybe during lunch. But the key point of RuPaul's Drag Race for me was I was in there and I was talking to, I was going about my business like we were working. It really was a sisterhood. How many of you know who Alyssa Edwards is? So Alyssa Edwards is probably one of the more famous drag queens from RuPaul's Drag Race. And her and I shared a station at the Mirror together, and we were just kikiing and talking, and she's like, well, girl, like, why are, she's like, you're fierce and everything, but like, you're like, these were her words. She's like, but you're like educated and you have this thing about you. You're like, very like, I feel like you could be doing other things. Like I'm doing this because I have to do this. Like why are you here? Like you need to be going and like pursuing that in your social work because that is what's really powerful and that's what's going to make a change. And I was like, I hear you. And then in the same breath, she said, of course, I also said the same thing to Shangela, and look where she is now. So. But she said those things to me, and I was like, okay, that's interesting, and I took that in. And so then it came to episode 4. I did make it through 4 episodes for those of you who haven't watched the show. And then, which is like halfway. And then there was this shady double elimination thing that happened. So I'm gonna walk you through a little bit of what happened there. I am under contract for $1 million, not to say too much about anything. What I will say is that I think that it was interesting how it all turned out, and I feel like I got a lot more positive feedback through the competition than was actually aired from the show, which is fine, and that's just how the game goes, and that's how we move forward and how we're entertained. But one of the moments that I remember most clearly is that I was on that stage, and I had a moment of like, okay, calm down, you're gonna do this lip sync, you're not gonna pull your wig off, you're not gonna pull your shoes off, you're just gonna do this lip sync and get through it, and you'll be great because you've gotten such positive feedback from the judges up until now. And you've never been in the bottom. So I did that, and then we both lip synced, we sat, and RuPaul left. She left the stage and she didn't come back for what seemed like forever. And I'm sitting there thinking like, she's taking way longer than normal, but of course I'm in the hot seat, so I'm thinking maybe it's just me, but later on I was told no, she actually took way longer than normal. And while I was up there, I had time to reflect, and I remember thinking, God, I really want this, but if there is something better out there for me, or if there is something else out there for me to do with my life, I'm gonna trust in you, and I'm gonna have, and direct me and show me the way. Like, I'm just gonna give it up to you, and you do what you want, And so, and then I was double eliminated, which was kind of interesting. I mean, it was, you know, an answer to a prayer, I think. I mean, I think that it showed me that there were other things, other paths for me to take. And I think that path was really and truly activism. I'm going to tell you one more story related to drag before I get really back into the activism thing, which was... Oh, I have 3 minutes? That's it? Oh, fudge. Okay. I wanted to tell you my X Factor story, but that can wait until another time. So, part of... Okay, so let's see. So what have I really done? So since all of that took place, I feel like what I'm really grateful to RuPaul's Drag Race for is for giving me a platform. Not only a platform, but also giving me the experience that I needed to be put on a national stage. And X Factor did this too. I got to go in front of Simon Cowell, Britney Spears, and all these people, and like, you know, have this like hundreds, I don't know, or I should say thousands of people in the audience, and sort of have this experience where I was like, you know what, if I can do this, I can do anything. I can walk into a room and just, you know, like I've handled it, I can do this. And so it gave me that confidence, and it also gave me a platform where I had the ability to talk to people and to influence people, and also the ability to bring people up with me. And when I talk about bringing people up with me, I'm really talking about being an ally. And what being an ally means to me is, 1, acknowledging your privilege, 2, sharing your privilege, 3, making space for people, and 4, bringing people up with you. So I feel like I've done that in a couple different ways. One is I have a drag show called Mahogany Mondays, which used to happen every Monday night at the Midnight Sun. It happened for 4 years, and then, girl, she had to let that go because she started working in City Hall, and then also I'm currently the owner of the Stud Collective. But while I was at Mahogany Mondays, one of the things that I really did was I noticed that there were so many really fierce African American drag queens in San Francisco, and they were really celebrated, but they just weren't getting booked as much as the other queens or acknowledged as much as the other queens. So for Mahogany Mondays, I would do things like have, once a month I would have a Black-only cast. So all the Black queens in the city, I would book them up, and I would make sure that they were there with me, you know, just so to give them that exposure. And in fact, for Black History Month, I did a complete blackout, and I called it Blackout Mondays, and had only African American performers. The other thing I've done is, you know, as much as I identify as femme and genderqueer, and you know, and I embrace my femininity, I also realize that I am male-bodied, and that carries privilege as well. And so, women have had a complicated relationship with the drag scene, and one of the things that I have done with Mahogany Mondays is have, again, Mahogany Mondays that were exclusively, you know, female-bodied or female-identified people performing and on stage, because they're fierce too, and I wanted to give them that platform. How much? We have like a minute left, huh? So I've also done things around, most recently working with Supervisor Jane Kim's office to create the Constance District, which is the world's first transgender cultural district, legally identified cultural district, that is in San Francisco in the Tenderloin. And we're creating a living, breathing neighborhood and a safe space for trans people to come from all over the world, because they're already going there, and we just want to officially acknowledge them and also protect that space in the face of the looming developments that just are changing San Francisco from the ground up. And the last thing I wanted to talk about was the Stud Collective, which is a group that I'm involved in. The Stud was a San Francisco gay bar that was losing its lease. The Stud Collective formed. We have this amazing democratic process. We got 17 people together, we pooled our money, we bought the Stud Bar, and we have the goal of keeping it alive for another 50 years. We've established it as a legacy business, and we are gonna make sure that it stays, our mission actually is keeping San Francisco queer. So those are some of the things that I've done most recently. I guess we'll continue this conversation at lunch, right? Thanks for letting me speak.